You're listening to the For ClimateTech series on the Forward Faster podcast, providing bite-sized insights for climate tech innovators.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to For ClimateTech's podcast powered by Forward Faster. I'm Chante Harris, and I am Senior Manager with Venture For ClimateTech. We are a climate tech venture studio and accelerator powered by NYCerta. With me today is Gary Johnson, Associate Chief Technology Officer of NYCx Inclusive Innovation at the Mayor's Office of the CTO, as well as Danielle Harris, Director of Mobility Innovation at Elemental Excelerator, one of my favorites personally, and Taj Eldridge, Senior Director of Investments at LACI, also known as Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator. That's another one of my favorites. I feel like I have to say that after saying that about Elemental. Thank you all for being here with me today. I'm really excited to host all of you. As we've discussed previously, we are really looking to celebrate Black History Month this year, and we wanted to highlight the important work and innovations that this panel of leaders is bringing to the climate tech space. This will be a conversation for us all, for our audience. And really, I want to follow your lead. Obviously, I've prepared questions, but I think if there's a route that you really want to take it or something that comes up that's particularly of interest of you, would love to hear from you all. And I know each of you do a lot of speaking around these issues and topics and are certainly well-versed. So again, feel free to take it where you want to. We do have sounds of Brooklyn behind me, so that is what it is, just noting that. We can go ahead and jump on in. My first question is actually going to be for Taj, but feel free, Danielle and Gary, to add on if anything comes up for you around this topic as well. So can you tell me, Taj, a little bit about your background and what you are currently working on at the intersection of cities and climate?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chante. Well, if you have the sounds of Brooklyn, I have the smells of the motherland with the sage in the background. If your listeners can feel it, you can feel the sage here. But
it's sage.
my and energy, right? Yeah, absolutely. So I think the interesting thing at LACI. I used to be a founder myself. I wasn't in clean tech the whole time, and I'll be honest. I fell into climate tech, clean tech only recently when I was at the University of California, Riverside, where I was the accelerator director. But I'll be very frank, and I'm very transparent about it. I got really ill about 3 years ago. Kidney failure and immediate kidney failure. And from what I gathered and really kind of doing it, it was about the environment that was one of the factors that caused it. So that for me really made me start looking at venture a little bit differently than just about achieving alpha. I started thinking about what's the point of making money when you're dead? There's a lyric that says that wealth can't buy health, and I think about that often when we look at the innovation that we want to fund in clean tech or climate tech, because what we're doing as investors is more than just about achieving alpha. What it's about is ensuring that our populations and our communities, especially, really survive. I want to get props to my colleague there, Danielle, because it was her who really kind of coined this from our conversation about is, climate justice and climate tech is more than just about, innovation and saving the world. It's about a public health issue. It's about an economic issue with job creation as well. So, one of the things that I love that LACI does is really kind of focusing on building an inclusive green economy and really working with founders in that space. And then one other thing I want to talk about in this space, and Danielle, Chante, you'll be be announced here, but myself and some partners, we're launching a fund of funds to invest in other fund managers called Include Ventures to focus on ESG and to have a focus on climate and build the next generation of Black and Brown fund managers who want to focus and invest in climate. So one of the things that taught me there is that you need an access to innovation, which is what the incubators and accelerators are. But the reality of it is too, in addition to that, you need access to capital, which is why we built Include Ventures to really kind of move forward the needle on that. And I think, lastly, I'll tell you this, there was this talk about the lack of people of color who may think about sustainability. And I remember someone asked me and saying that, there aren't a lot of sustainable or climate-based companies in Africa. Why is that? I say there are. We just look at climate differently. I think when you're talking about it, you're looking at it from a standpoint of, hey, this is something that's going to save the world years from now. This is the future ready. We're looking at climate, and a lot of people in the continent here domestically are looking at climate tech as opportunities to save things now. It's a not only future proofing, but now proofing. And I think that's the exciting thing about this sector that we're in.
Amazing. I didn't know we were going to get some exclusive announcements on this episode, but
only for you. Only for you.
Thank you, Taj. That is really exciting. Funds of funds are so important. I feel like I'm just now starting to see a bit more conversation about like how are funds funded, right? And where's that capital coming from? And what does it mean to diversify that landscape as well? So without going too much down that that conversation, Danielle, would love to hear from you, anything you want to share, particularly about your background or what you're currently working on.
Yeah, definitely. So at Elemental, I kind of set a really interesting intersection where, I'm, of course, looking for startups and then also trying to connect them with cities and corporates and other type of partners to deploy their technologies. And then also, of course, connecting them with investors. So it's always an exciting time. I kind of feel like I'm like an innovation matchmaker these days. But there's always like a lot of, it's so relational. I think that's kind of the key thing that we find within our roles. Like I'm a city planner by practice, and I'm always like, trying to figure out ways to tinker with the city. And honestly, after 10 years of city planning, I really found that, it's not, we're not at a loss in terms of technology. We just really need to work on relationships. And it sounds like really like, soft and squishy, but honestly, like there's like just so much, like there's so much skepticism. There's like so much fear. And so it's just, there's a lot to get over. And then there's also just like, like this is the way we've done it for the last 70 years. What's wrong? And so there's just so much to get over when it comes to innovation and really embracing new technologies. So I think the biggest thing that I've seen in terms of what's changing is just the fact that there's more people shooting their shot. And I think that's like, it sounds like really basic, but it's honestly like probably the most exciting thing for me. I'll share that so we're a Hawaii-based accelerator. It's really great to be able to say like, and you're in the accelerator and you get a free trip to Hawaii. And so one of those trips, it was like 80 founders. That's what we call CEO Summit. It's kind of like camp for entrepreneurs. But it was like 80 founders. They're primarily white males. And I just realized that I was having a really visceral like response to the way that they were engaging. And it was the fact that they were just like sitting around spitballing ideas just really wildly and just like so joyfully. And I was having a visceral response because I realized that I was having a scarcity of imagination. Like they all were just unlimited in the possibilities in which they perceive the world. Like they were just like, yeah, and then we can get like 5 million from this guy that we know. And then we know somebody else that will give us like 10 million for this. And then they already had built a runway in their mind. And I was realizing, I was like, I don't even have like a single brick to my runway. And so I think that's what I realized is a lot of what's hindering innovation within communities of color and specifically within Black communities is like, we really need to be encouraging each other to like dream and imagine, because that's really how we get people to shoot their shot. So I just think like, the more like I'm just seeing more and more diverse founders come into the space. And I think a lot of that is because of like folks like Taj, because honestly, like there's more diverse investors, I think fundraising while Black is a real thing. It's very, very challenging. It's very discouraging. A lot of the things, you're like, am I crazy? And it's like, nah, you're having a different experience. And so I think that just the fact that there's more diverse investors out there is really great. And I also think there's a lot more women out there. And I'm seeing a lot more Black entrepreneurs myself. And so I just seeing a lot of that is coming from, the culture. I think, like, honestly, Earn Your Leisure guys, they're doing something really great with their podcasts. I think, when you're seeing celebrities have their own VCs, people are starting to be like, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? I think the whole thing that happened with GameStop was like, all of a sudden people are into stocks and realizing other ways of making money. And then you have, John Henry, Arlen Hamilton, and, honestly, Clubhouse has been a big thing that I think the startup world has really embraced. But I think it's just opening up the conversation, letting people know that there's space for you. And talking about specifically about space is just there's new organizations that have been popping up that are saying you're supposed to be here, right? There's Black VC, there's Green Tech Noir started by Neka Uzo, and there's Balance, right? And so there's just all these other things that are popping up. And I think it's really like, making sure that people know, like, you're supposed to be here. There's a space for you, and there's a community that's waiting to embrace you. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing is the difference within innovation. And I'm really excited to say, like, I'm going to continue to look for founders of color to add to our portfolio at Elemental.
Amazing. Well, you covered so much, and it made me think about the first time we connected. And I just remember both of us being like, you're my person. And it was such an incredible call. And I was so happy. And I remember saying, like, sometimes the space can feel really lonely, right? For like a Black person, a Black woman, and being able to connect with you and be like, oh, right, like there's other people who geek out about like future of cities and how we get around and what it means to bring together diverse stakeholders and cross-sector collaboration. And
exactly.
You've been saying like, shoot your shot. I've heard you say that before. And I think that it's so incredible it's such a necessary statement, because I think it's about who we let, right, shoot their shot or feel like they can shoot their shot. And even just since I've been in this space, like over the past few years, being able to do what I do because, you're doing your work, and because Taj has done his work, and because Gary's doing his work, like seeing how much it's expanded and how many more faces that look like me have popped into it. It's just really exciting. Clearly there's more work to do, right? But like,
and just to add to that piece is just like, it's not that, Chante, I know you're in this space, and Taj is in this space, and Gary's in this space. It's the fact that I see all y'all hustling, and I'm like, oh, let me do my thing too. Right. And so I think that's the other really powerful thing about it.
Right. No.
And before we get together, I want to highlight what Danielle said. I want to show that's important. But this is why diversity matters. She mentioned one thing that you rarely hear when we talk about venture, and that's relationships. Mm-hmm. Relationships. And the thing about it is that far too many people take withdrawals from relationships more than they take to make deposits. Meaning that you want to give first, you want to deposit into those relationships first. And we hear all the time that it's like a marriage. But how many times we also hear marriage don't last in this modern society, right? Because a lot of people don't know how to do it. So I definitely want to make sure that we highlighted a piece of that relationships matter. Relationships matter as you're building both as an investor and as a founder.
For sure. And Taj, I remember our first conversation, and it wasn't that long ago. I think it was like mid 2020 when COVID had just started, and it was the same realization, because I think Danielle connected us, actually, now that I think about it. So yeah, it's all relationships. So I want to move into hearing a bit from Gary, who I'm just so excited agreed to join this conversation. Before I do, want to shout out Taj. I know Danielle mentioned Clubhouse, and Taj joined our Climate Tech Club last week for a conversation. It was just absolutely amazing, as always. And I remember, to Danielle's point, like the hustle, I was like, I don't want to start another thing. Like, I'm tired. I'm doing so many things. But one of my friends, Kylan, who's the co-creator, saying, like, if we don't do it, someone who's not diverse, who doesn't have our lens, is going to start one and is not going to incorporate the things that matter to us and that we care about. And like, just from doing it for like 3 weeks, we have over 4,000 people. And we intend for every conversation to have an equity lens. And so just, shout out to Taj. Also really resonated with what you said, Danielle, about like hustling. Cause like, I feel like once I see folks doing the things that they're doing, I'm like, all right, there's no time for me to like not do the work. Right. Okay, Gary, hi.
It's all good.
Yeah, no. I mean, speaking of doing the work, I feel like you have been talking about inclusive innovation since before, like, people were saying that phrase.
It was a thing, right?
Right. And really leading on the idea that I think government can both incubate, but also support leading innovations that are diverse and actually think through some of the problems and then the solutions. Would love to just kind of make space first for you to share a little bit about, of course, your background and then, what you're currently working on. I know that you have more of a broader sort of cities perspective, but definitely I think the beautiful thing about this group and the work that we do is we understand it all intersects. So I'm going to give you the floor now.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And it feels like I'm joining a family, which feels great. So I'm happy to be a part of it. Thank you for having me. I would first just echo a lot of what's been said already around how relationships are the capital in this space. And you have to give in order to get. I always say working in New York City government is like working at a Fortune 100 company. There's like 300,000 employees. We have a $90 billion budget. Our ability to work and manage relationships within New York City government and externally, public-private partnerships is how we get things done. And a huge part of my work today. So work in the mayor's office of the CTO. I know it's a mouthful. But on the inclusive innovation portfolio, what that means is I get to operate as a bit of a generalist. So I'm not an expert in climate tech, but I work across different tech verticals, climate, mobility, cybersecurity, et cetera, to think about how New York City government can procure, pilot, invest, and scale solutions to improve quality of life for New Yorkers. So I'm also a born and raised New Yorker. You might hear Harlem specifically in the background. So I love being able to do this work in my hometown. Don't ask me about the Knicks. That's for a separate conversation. But I've worked in policy, economic development for the last 10 years. And I really sort of, I think emerged into sort of the intersection of government innovation over the last 6 years, as someone from New York, as someone from Harlem, working in workforce policy. I saw this trend in how tech and innovation was going to disrupt the way we develop programs and policies. So I wanted to have my perspective at that table. So I fought to get here, and it has been an exciting journey. In 2017, I helped launch our NYCx platform, which is an R&D platform for what we call breakthrough emerging technology. So we work with communities, traditionally underrepresented, underserved communities like Brownsville, Brooklyn. Right now, we're in Inwood, Washington Heights, and Manhattan, where we work with community stakeholders to better understand what are their core challenges and how do we bring in business innovation and emerging technologies to help solve for those problems in a collaborative process. So we just closed on a mental health tech challenge in Inwood, Washington Heights for Latinx youth. And over a year ago, we closed a zero waste pilot in Brownsville, Brooklyn. We brought in an aerobic digestion machine to bring organics processing to Brownsville, Brooklyn. So it's been an exciting journey. We also have a moonshot program where we work with emerging technologies and cybersecurity to bring cyber solutions to small businesses, as well as thinking about how do we proliferate EV charging stations across the city, leveraging emerging technologies with a priority of vulnerable communities first. So it's been exciting. We also get to focus on broadband equity, which I think is at the foundation of a lot of this smart cities, climate tech, urban inclusion, is ensuring that folks have access to equitable broadband. So it's exciting. I think we have a lot of things coming down the hopper. We're in the last year of an administration, so there's like an eagerness to get so many things done. And there are a lot of policies that have been emerging on a federal and state level, especially as it relates to climate, that I hope we can talk about a little bit, that I think will be important as we continue to think about innovation in this space. And so finally, my passion is to work with underrepresented founders in urban tech, right? So I do that through the NYCx platform, and my work with Chante on occasion and talking to different startups and entrepreneurs. But I think, my goal is to get more Black and brown founders to do business with government. There's billions of dollars are being invested in the urban tech ecosystem that we don't get to participate in that upside, right? And I do think there's a rising tide that's happening. You mentioned Harlem Capital and all these other players. There's a growing ecosystem. I think there's a business case that's being made for diversity, right? We're moving into a multicultural nation, and how it's important to really think about inclusion in the product development cycle, especially after the last year we've had, right? So how do we ride this wave and make sure that we're able to participate?
Amazing. Yeah. Also, I just want to say on 2 points that you made. There was during the Clubhouse conversation, I think NECA actually made that point. We have not connected, but she agreed to be a part of our Clubhouse room. So shout out to her. Her and I are supposed to connect soon. She actually, I think, made the point around what you were saying around access, right? Like, how are we talking about innovations in areas where, people might not even have access to broadband, right? They don't have the same level of either tech tools or resources that are even needed if we're talking about the future of climate or, urban tech, particularly from an impact perspective. So just really think that's so important. I know you've been doing a lot of work around that. So just something that I think doesn't always get brought up in the conversation, but is so critical. So thank you for highlighting that. And then also just wanted to reiterate the fact that I remember Gary just always being really helpful, even in my previous role. Like, I, at one point, was like, women of color need more funding, and there's a lot of panels or kind of data starting to come out around this, but every time I go to a discussion, it's like, here's the challenge, here's the challenge, here's the challenge. And I was basically like, I want to host a conversation of really influential people who can talk about solutions. And he came, and it was just an idea that I came up with. And I'm lucky enough to have amazing folks in my community who were like, yeah, let's do this thing. And it was, I think, fall of 2019. So really before it became like a broader conversation. I think now everyone's almost talking about it, but I just knew that like we needed more solutions, and that the solutions weren't going to come from one sector. And Gary showed up and was just incredible and offered his assistance to every woman of color founder in the room. So just thank you, for everything that you do and really like walking the walk, right? So yeah, just want to say that.
Yeah, can I just jump in there really quick?
Sure.
Like, Chante, why you've been holding out on Gary? Like, Gary want to do projects with tech companies in the city with those government dollars.
There's no east. There's no more east-west feud. You got to come to the west.
We resolved it on this podcast.
I just said I had a lot going on, so I need you all to cut the break. No, you know what's so funny is that I'm so happy Green Tech Noir. I'm saying that right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm so happy it launched because I actually sent it to Gary. So just so you don't think I'm fake, I sent that to Gary like a week and a half ago because Gary and I had a call maybe 3 weeks to a month ago now. And I was like, hey, like we had talked about maybe starting a Slack group, literally, or some sort of group to bring together like urban tech, climate tech conversations with like the depth of policy. And literally our conversation was like, maybe we should start this thing. And I was like, Gary's like, well, you already have a lot going on, Chante. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And so I was so happy. Yeah, I was so happy I didn't have to create it. Like it was so great to see it come out. Immediately I was ecstatic and I sent it to him because that's what we do. We share resources.
Right.
And I was like, you got to meet people. So
Gary, I'll find you on the Slack.
Yeah, same. And the thing about it, the reason why this is so awesome, and thank you, Chante, is because one of the areas that we've, as diverse communities, have missed out on is the public-private partnerships. When I was at the university, one of the things that boggle my mind is, why don't we have a lot of people of color get into funding from the federal government, from SBIR, STTR, that is just free money that's out there to help? Because, when I was telling people all the time, like, there was no such thing as friends and family in my youth. I think I heard somebody saying on the call where they're like, the only friends and family that, things that my family got was encouragement, but no capital, right? So I think that's, the aspect of government. And the good thing about it is there's so many people like Gary who work in government, who understand that they're at this intersection of government and innovation. And I think the old way of looking at government as inefficient should be out the window, because you have people who are efficient in government, which is effectively going to make it also efficient as well. So it's shout out to people like Gary who are there, who are really bridging the gap between government and innovation.
Gary,
I appreciate that, Taj. Yeah, no, I think, like I said, I think this industry, emerging tech innovation, has already disrupted the way we operate. When you look at Uber and car sharing, how that's disrupted the city landscape. Our office is there to be that front door for the industry, to understand how these technologies are going to disrupt, and how do we collaborate and create policies that help them grow ethically, right, and with people in mind. And then, my mission is to ensure that the entrepreneurs that get to create are from the community, who understand the communities that they will be developing in. And that's not lost in the conversation. So that's what I'm championing. They're in climate specifically. The Cuomo just announced a $17 million investment into climate equity. The Biden administration has a Justice 40 initiative. We just announced an environmental justice report and study that the city will be commissioning. So there's a lot of windfall here, specifically in climate innovation, that I think, we don't get to participate in, or we're just not aware of. We're not plugged into those conversations. So very happy to be part of this conversation.
And Chante, I know you're the host, but I just have a question. I got to create the Office of Innovation in San Francisco. And so, Gary, I was just hoping, could you share kind of like how you feel politics plays into the innovation that happens within the city?
It's
You just listed a bunch of people's initiatives, so that's what really got me thinking about it.
and like Cuomo and hopefully I don't get in trouble, and the mayor, they've been best of buds, right? And then obviously there was a lack of leadership from the federal level, so politics plays a huge role. We pulled out of the Paris Accord agreement, right? Which was a huge part of, globally, making climate policy and environmental justice a priority. It really became a big issue for New York, specifically after Hurricane Sandy in 2012, where a lot of investment went into it. But yeah, I think to answer your question, politics plays a huge role, especially in a city like New York, where we rotate out of the mayors every 4 years. We're in a new agenda. We've had to stop and start in different iterations. So this is my second mayor. I worked for Bloomberg before. So I've been able to see the sort of change in policies and sort of political leadership over the last several years. But yeah, I think, I guess the short answer is yes, absolutely. My hope is that, there seems to be alignment from the federal, state, and local level now on this issue in particular, and the role of digital innovation. So I'm excited for what that means for the next 3 or 5 years. But we've worked with the mayor's office of San Francisco. A lot of folks, our former CTO, Miguel Gamino, came from San Francisco, and I worked with the late Mayor Ed Lee, and my former boss, who went to the state. So there are a lot of government innovation folks that understand government, understand politics, and those relationships that I think are important to helping grow this ecosystem.
So vote federally, state, and local. That's
Exactly. Yeah, I think the key word there was alignment was just like getting alignment across the board. Just like that's like the political alignment is like innovation runway within government in my eyes.
And who has the biggest headline, right? Who can make the biggest announcement? Exactly. And then everyone wants to do it, right? I want to do 100 million or whatever. So there's that part.
I remember in my old role, we would leverage that, like look at what LA's doing, look at what San Francisco's doing, and, look at the company that's doing it for them or the type of impact they're having. And, would oftentimes find that for a place like New York, that actually can have a major impact, right? Being able to say like it's gone well somewhere else. And I'm sure that's not just, specific to New York. Okay, so this is great. I do want to kind of loop back to a discussion around innovation and founders, not that policy isn't innovative as well, but, Danielle, I think I'll start with you, but with, Gary and Taj, if you have additions, feel free to jump in. What are some of the most exciting innovations that you're seeing in the space, and who's bringing them to the table? Would love to also talk about any Black founders in particular that you're excited about.
Definitely. So I think what's most exciting about the space is honestly just like the space is becoming ours. So I definitely covered that, but I think it's more of like getting the lived experience. Founders with lived experience is probably my most exciting thing, honestly. There's a report from a professor. Her name is Susan Shaheen. I think she just got tapped to. Anyways, so there's a report from Susan Shaheen about emerging mobility, and it was from like 2016 or something like that. And she just did an assessment to see who is using emerging mobility at that time, and basically the user group closely mirrored the creators, right? So they were typically white males. They made six figures. They were well-to-do, white collar, what have you. And I think that's not a coincidence, right? So I think it's just having a massive amount of empathy within the design process, which is a big reason why I decided to go to Elemental. When I was at the city, I realized that I was doing a lot of mitigating, right? And I realized that if I just got to go to the design table, then I would get to use my time more efficiently, honestly. And so I think that's a really big thing. So I think, Chante knows Sanni, founder of Dollaride. Both his uncles are dollar van drivers. Gary knows him too, right? And so it's just like, he has such a great story, but it's when Sue talks about the business and like, he's talking about the app, right? He's trying to pair dollar van drivers with riders and having like real estate developers and bids be a customer is like, there's just so much empathy on the driver's side, and that's really not the case when you talk to other companies. It's kind of like, you're really designing the customer facing side of the app and you want to make sure it's easy to do and you don't want to mess up the work stream. And then it's kind of like, oh yeah, let's tinker on the driver's side. We'll do a little bit over there. But I really appreciate that Sue is so focused on like, how do we help the drivers? And I think that's what makes him really unique. So that's definitely one founder. And I think part of that is just like, right, we're creating jobs, we're making jobs better. And similarly is someone that Taj and I have in common is Kameale Terry at ChargerHelp, right? So I think, I talked to Kameale pretty early days when she was just like, I'm doing this, right? And I was like, if you want to do it, sis, I'm here for you, right? And now we're like a whole year later, and we just got off at the Q4 meeting, and I'm wearing my cat ears, but it's just a fact that it's just like a great community that she built around her company, right? So it's just like a team. She built a team of like a team, investors, advisors, technicians. And what she's doing is she's maintaining all of the electric vehicle chargers that people say need to come to existence in order to electrify transport. right? And it's basically we just have these stranded assets that have been like poorly, maintained. And she's like, someone needs to take care of these. And I was like, of course there's a Black woman coming in to take care of the things that people forgot. Why is this surprising, everyone? Right? And so I think it's just the fact that she built this. It's already like, I feel like she's on a rocket ship. She's having an amazing experience. And honestly, I'm just really happy to watch it. But I think it's just like having founders that have a lived experience, have the empathy, and really wanting to create jobs is pretty much the most exciting thing for me within the innovation space. And it's honestly just really affirming of like why I'm here.
Yeah, and I want to add, Danielle and I, our respective organizations, share a lot of companies in common, and I think that that's not by happenstance. It's because I think that we both organizations, we look at what we're doing not as competitive but as collaborative. We're all trying to focus on a solution. I think for me, I look at an example, and I think Danielle kind of mentioned on about that lived experience. And I remember when scooters or micromobility first came to California, right? It was all on the west side, which is predominantly the white area, and there was hardly any in the east side where a large Latino community. There was hardly any on the south side or south area where a large Black community. And one of the things that I love that me as a person of color kind of get into it, especially on the Afro-Latino side, is understanding that taking this product of micromobility, a scooter, and making it relevant for a different community. Something as small as putting a basket on these scooters changes the whole dynamic of what they're used for, right? That's just something to where you need to have where diversity pays, and having people diverse on the company really kind of makes it really happen. And I think for me, some founders that I'm really excited about, actually one that's in Gary's neck of the woods in Buffalo, Spark Charge, which is funded by Nasserda, that's also in LACI. Josh Aviv, he's from, shout out to Dallas, he's from Dallas as well. He's doing some great things. I'm really loving what he's doing with the whole idea about charging infrastructure as well. So I think that's really, really great. One other founder that I would love to kind of shout out is Sabrina Williams. She is building something called Seed Systems on the agriculture side. I feel like that as we're making innovation, there's a lot of focus on the way we drive, but there needs to be a focus, especially for our community, again, on what we eat and how we eat. There's a guy by the name of Ron Finley in LA called the Gangsta Gardener. And so I'm loving to see how that's building up in a lot of the communities about the community gardens and everything else. But Sabrina and Seed, she's really kind of bringing this idea of urban farming to the masses, and showing that you can be in an apartment, you can be in a space that might be as not optimal as a home, and still contribute to growing and really building a good, viable garden for yourself, and really healing through food. So those are two founders that I really enjoyed and that I'm enjoying and watching. And just know there are many out there. There are several. PitchBook just came out with a list of some awesome founders, so definitely check that out as well.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of these folks I haven't heard about, so I can't wait to look them up and make them known here. But I would shout out for sure Jessica Matthews at Uncharted Power, not only because she has her startup in Harlem, but the incredible journey she's had from going from like essentially like a sustainable toy company to a company focusing on infrastructure and power and accessibility. So this seems like the right time for companies like hers to be growing and blossoming. There's another company called Acclima. They're doing more measurement technology. They're a California-based company that we've been working with here in the city and at New Lab in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And there's one other, Block Power, Donald Bird. All these folks you probably know of, but they've just been doing incredible work here in the city.
Yeah, amazing. I love that.
We're gonna make like a shout out track.
Yeah,
I know, absolutely. I know. Just like do some drops.
Maybe they can edit all of our shout outs in the
Yeah, I was gonna add Jasmine Crowe in there from Gooder.
Yeah.
Julia Collins from Planet Forward. We can keep it going. It's more.
Yeah. Kylan, who started the ClimateTech Clubhouse room with me, she's working at Planet Forward with Julia. Amazing. Yeah, I think what's so exciting is like all of those names. I'm like, yeah, like they, that's like me in the back of my mind being a hype woman, because I've just seen a lot of their journeys to where they are now, and it's just really exciting. And Jessica Matthews, actually, we connected with her not too long ago, and she was like, I wish you all could adopt me to your first cohort for Venture for ClimateTech. We're like, you're way too far along for us, but we would love to support you anyways. Okay, so I would love to talk a little bit, just before we wrap up, about funding for these founders. I think particularly because, we're all talking about the challenge of building companies like these and in this space, right? When we think about how capital intensive they are, how oftentimes they require an additional layer of regulation and policy. And so just curious to hear from you all, how do you think about those challenges when supporting these companies? What has that looked like, particularly for diverse founders who we already know are underfunded? And then, if there's an idea or solution that you're working on, would love to hear that too, since Taj already dropped us with that great announcement. But I know that's a big question, but it's a big problem. So would love to hear from you all about how do you think about the funding challenges and opportunities for climate tech founders, and particularly, right, diverse ones and Black ones?
Yeah, I think real quick, two things. So definitely, launching the fund of funds was having in the back of my mind about really supporting Black and brown fund managers who have the authority and the financial backing to make these decisions. But the reason that it came to us is because at LACI, we launched our impact fund last year and a debt fund as well. And we're thankful we have an LP that really supported the decisions that we made within the framework. So we have a framework that makes when we make our investment decisions, that's really threefold. So in addition to the traditional way that we look at a company in regards to whether we want to invest, we make sure they have economic impact, which goes without saying that they're in our ecosystem and incubator. We look and see if they have economic impact, but specifically, are they hiring or are they deploying the technology in LMIs, low to moderate income environments, or opportunity zones? So we want to see that, and now they're proof in it. And then the third piece of that is social impact, meaning that specifically, do you have an underrepresented male or female in your C-suite, senior leadership, or your board? The reason why we did that is because we, with the C-suite and senior leadership, that's something that the founder can control, and we can assist the founder with by introducing to these organizations. But the reason why we also included the board membership, to be honest, is to look at the funds and say, look, do you have people at your fund that you could put on the board here that is diverse? If you don't, then there's a problem. And your founder is not going to get this funding, and the founder's going to be kind of, may not have you on their cap table. So it was really, I think that for us was really a way to value diversity and quantify it and make sure and show people that yes, it pays, right? Another thing that we did really quickly is that in addition to the funding piece, that as many founders know, when they go into accelerators, they come up and they give up part of their equity in the form of a warrant. What we decided to do is take that same model and say, look, if you're advancing on social impact, if you're advancing on economic impact in diverse communities or underrepresented founders or what have you, we will actually give you part of your equity back, part of your warrant back. So it's a buyback again that shows that diversity pays. And so I think that's the thing that's been really stuck in my mind that made me decide to focus on a fund of funds and the things we're doing there at LACI.
Amazing. Cool. Well, I'll just add, I think for Venture for ClimateTech, you all, I don't think have had the chance to meet Jackie, but I hope you will soon. She's married.
Shout out to VC Familia. Jackie and I are in it. Shout out to the Afro Latinos in the house. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think for us both being, a woman of color, her being of Latinx descent, and myself being African American, we just sort of see it as a no-brainer to embed this stuff from the beginning. And since we're launching a new program, we have the flexibility to do that. And we don't see it as just the program. We see it as this entire ecosystem that we're building and bringing, folks like yourselves who are already doing the work into it, rather than replicating, right, which sometimes we oftentimes see. And then I think on the funding side, a big goal of ours is how do we really present founders with all of their options. From my experience scaling companies, I think, Danielle, you said something that really hit home for me around realizing I was mitigating. I was going and building these go-to-market strategies, helping teams expand in New York or the US, and going, wow, if this had just been built differently, or if there had been some design sessions earlier on to think about these things, right, in a real way, then not only would it be saving this company time, it'd be saving them money, it'd be expanding their impact, they'd be able to actually acquire customers quickly because they thought about their customers. And so it's one of the reasons why, I'm in this role now is being able to be there from the beginning and not only, choose diverse founders, because we're so early stage, we're like, you can be as early as an idea, you don't have to be incorporated. So diversifying the pipeline from the beginning and being able to pass them on to the Elementals of the world, to the LACIs of the world, is something that I'm really passionate about. But, I think to take it back to the funding piece, we really see it as, how do you look at debt and project finance? How do you look at these public-private partnerships, government money, angel investors, right? And then VCs for sure. But all of these aspects, and really build a funding strategy that makes sense for your company. And so I'm excited about what that means. And I know we're not the only ones talking about this, but I think being able to, have the runway we have, being able to see two women of color in the position that we are in, we are just really excited. And so when we talk about environmental justice, for Jackie and I, it's really right. Like, let's talk about, it's a part of everything that we do in every aspect of what we're building, not a siloed conversation. And I think just really excited to see, what that turns into. So yeah, I'll pause there. I know that we folks are busy and are going to have to run in a few minutes. So would love to kind of wrap up with one, how can people, stay in touch with you or follow you and hear what you're working on and your updates? And then two, if there's anything sort of pressing, whether it be an initiative or an opportunity that you're working on that you want folks to get engaged in, would love to make space for you all to share about that as well. And maybe, Gary, not to put you on the spot, but we can start with you.
Yeah, I'll jump in and I'll be brief. I would love folks to connect with us. We have a host of new innovation challenges, particularly in climate tech, creating R&D opportunities as a pathway to city dollars, right? So that's one way to access capital. Specifically, we passed Local Law 97 in 2019, which is about building retrofits. The first compliance year comes in 2024. So we'll be ramping up, right? I think there's going to be a lot of investing. Again, mentioned something like the federal implications and state implications I mentioned. There'll be a lot of investing in that technology. So we want to create those pathways for entrepreneurs to do that work. The city, Department of Buildings is doing that. Economic Development Corporation is doing that. So I'd love to talk more about that with anyone who's interested in if I can be helpful. So yeah, just stay tuned. And I think those are some of the highlights.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary. Taj, want to jump in here?
Yeah, so my album on SoundCloud drops, but no, just kidding. No, but number one, Chante, thank you for this. So definitely, anybody definitely follow LA Incubator, www.laincubator.org. In addition to that, we're recruiting for market access, which is Series A companies and later. And we just finished up our recruitment for Series C, but we're going to immediately start doing our cohort 3. We just finished cohort 2. But definitely there's a couple of different contests that you'll see, from Climate Cup, which focuses on energy companies, to LA Commotion, which focuses on transportation companies, that happens in the fall. And if anybody's on Twitter, I'm at Econo Ahmad on Twitter and definitely LinkedIn. So definitely reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Taj. And last but certainly not least, Danielle, who has the same last name as me. So even though we say we're not related, I feel like she's family.
Definitely. Yeah, so I would say on the Elemental side, what's going on is we will be recruiting for cohort 10. And we have some pretty exciting announcements coming. Basically, we're trying to get more companies under the tent than our usual 15 to 20 companies. Applications open February 15th. And so, yeah, I think anybody that's interested, definitely reach out. You can find me on Twitter at innovation_DJ. Definitely not as exciting as Taj's Twitter, but I try to keep up the best I can. And Gary, definitely send me your Calendly link because I would love to talk with you. Trying to get more projects to happen in cities. That's like my number one commitment. I just feel like a lot of cities have been hit really hard with COVID.
Yeah.
And just trying to do as much as I can and recruit those types of companies that are there to help cities.
Excellent. Yeah, I would love to do some work with you.
Yes.
Innovation DJ is such a good Twitter name. So, I don't know what she's talking about. Her Twitter is just as amazing as.
Yeah, absolutely. She's the DJ Khaled of CleanTech.
Another one.
You should put that on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, Danielle. That'd be so good. Okay, amazing. Well, I know that we are wrapping up now, so I just want to say thank you so much for coming on to our podcast and making space. I know each of you are really, really busy, and I feel like every time I reach out to literally every one of you, even if it's with like a crazy idea or last minute ask, you're just so supportive, and I think it really emulates the type of ecosystem we all want to build together. So that's my commitment to you as well moving forward. And so yeah, we'll see the audience on our next episode as well. And if you want to follow our podcast series and see more of our work, you can head over to forclimatetech.org. That's FOR climatetech.org. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks again to our guests, Danielle, Gary, and Taj, and we'll see you all next time.
Great. Thank you so much, Chante.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.